Here we go.
Thanks.
All right, we'll just wait a few minutes to see who's going to join us. There's no one on here yet. We could do an introduction. It's Jackie, Brad, and Kim. Kim, get your face in. At the Neonarcissism Podcast on, what's the date today? April 27th. Live here on TikTok. We're going to try to get all our faces in here. For everybody that's joining us, we're just going to wait a few more minutes for other people to join. But it's a Q&A today on narcissism, so please feel free to write your questions down that you might have. We do have one topic we were going to start talking about today, which was one question we had. What was it, Kim?
Yeah, somebody posted a question, asked, what are the signs that a narcissist is uncomfortable? This is in reference to a video we did about not interrupting someone's discomfort. So, yeah, so signs that somebody is, or that the narcissist is uncomfortable. So we can start with that.
So, well, I think we can maybe clarify a little bit further what you mean by, not taking responsibility for somebody else's comfort. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay.
So, who wants to?
You started the video. I'll elaborate.
I did start the video.
Yeah.
So that video was about when the empath and narcissist are interacting, and the empath may have a tendency to take responsibility for the discomfort that the narcissist is in when truth is on the table, and the empath wanting to fix that, so to speak, or interrupt that experience for the narcissist. So that's sort of the context in which we were talking about that.
Yeah, and ultimately what ends up happening is you end up taking over responsibility in the situation for the emotional regulation for the narcissist themselves, right? So they don't have to do the emotional regulation all on their own. So what are the signs that, a narcissist is uncomfortable? Well, the key underlying factor is that the environment isn't working in the direction that they want it to work in. Because generally narcissists, their emotions are regulated externally rather than internally. So you'll get all kinds of reactions off of a person. So if you're not keeping them comfortable, of course, this is where we run into gaslighting.
Yeah.
They'll start provoking you to try to create a reaction in you so that the light comes off of them, and that just eases them. Yeah.
There can be like an immediate elevation of aggression or anger. So, they might be really calm in the moment just before, and then as soon as you aren't taking up the usual role that you do to keep them comfortable, then you can see this really big quick spike often. So that could be a sign.
Make a mountain out of a molehill, or the reverse, a molehill out of a mountain.
Yeah, so the narcissist will make a mountain out of your molehill, and will make a molehill out of their mountain. So if there's something that they did that is a large transgression, they will minimize that to be as small as possible. And if you did just the smallest thing to upset them, which wouldn't typically upset, a more healthy individual, a reasonable individual, they'll turn it into a mountain. So, yeah. Okay, do we have any questions?
Yeah, just for those who hopped on here, we are open to questions tonight. So if you have some questions regarding narcissism, relationships with narcissists, feel free to type them in. Okay. Going through when a narcissistic mother continues to send gifts, should the gifts be kept or sent back? Ooh.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think the main question is what is attached to those gifts?
Yeah.
So, of course, you know your situation and you know your mother better than we do. But essentially, if you have the sense that those gifts come with strings attached, then, yeah, ultimately holding a boundary on not receiving them may be the best thing to do.
Yeah. And I guess that gift giving would come around possibly love bombing. So it would depends what phase that you're in the relationship or what they're trying to do with the gifts in that moment too. Yeah.
Yeah, like Brad's saying, if there's a history of it coming back to you, like, well, but remember the thing that I did or I gave, or then those strings attached aren't going to be healthy for anybody.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, narcissists will give gifts in a very selfish way, right? Because they're looking for praise or appreciation, or, it's oftentimes more selfish on their end to give you a gift. Yeah.
Or it's like a setup for a future event. Like, if something happens or you wrong the narcissist or put some truth on the table, they'll be like, but remember when I gave you the gift? And, it can all be used as leverage later on.
Yeah, and it can be a form of a virtue signal as well. So, yeah.
Part of the show.
Yeah, kind of the idea that they can turn around and say, see, I do things that show I love you. What have you done to show me you love me?
That said, absolutely strings attached, gifts left on my French porch. She shows up unannounced. Yeah. How do you deal with a child with BPD and narcissism?
It really depends on the age of the child, of course, whether they're living within the same home as you or whether they're more of an adult child living outside of the home. Oftentimes, if they're outside the home, you'll see them basically treat you like a resource, like a revolving door. And as long as you remain the resource and provide the supply, they'll keep coming back to you. But yeah, if you don't provide them the supply, you won't hear from them for a while.
Yeah. Or if you set any boundaries, they will not like that. They'll cut and run typically. Yeah. Yeah,
they'll cut and run, or they'll, of course, have this larger than life reaction too.
Yes.
So.
Sometimes, where is this? Sometimes you make me feel guilty if I leave my narcissist boyfriend. My narcissist boyfriend, sometimes he makes me guilty if I try and leave him. Yeah.
Well, and they'll pull out all the stops too, right? Like, of course, I don't know your situation, but narcissists will go to the extent of even threatening their own lives if you don't comply and conform to them. And so really, one of the best ways for people to break down your boundaries is to play the guilt card. So if you have a good guilt button and they can press that button, it basically dissolves your boundaries.
Right. Yeah.
And if guilt doesn't work, they might go to shame. Right.
And
so then, go ahead.
No, keep going.
I was just gonna say they'll keep leveling up, right? So if I think the guilt tactic is one of the first that would land on the table.
Yeah.
And then if that doesn't work, they might go to try to shame you. If that's not working, then you start getting more into the threats. More aggressive tactics.
Yeah, more aggressive, or you'll the guilt shame. What you see a lot within guilt shame is they'll actually play the helpless card. So helpless, poor me, kind of victim, and looking to you as the only solution to that problem. And then, like you're saying, if those don't work, then they get more aggressive.
Yeah.
And then you'll see it cycle through. Because if they get aggressive and you set the boundary like this, and they have to go back to, oh no, maybe I need to be helpless, because if I'm helpless, then I'm not a threat. Then, they try all kinds of.
This is where you start to feel crazy, because you're like it's hard to keep up to all those, the swing of all of that. Yeah.
And you can see it, sometimes you can see it in a matter of minutes, right? The more crafty ones aren't, as quick to shift gears in that sense, but you'll see all of them.
I understand what you're saying. My mother said if I ever left her, she would slit her own wrist. Yeah.
Like that's ridiculous.
It's not reasonable.
Yeah. Amounts of emotional weight, and it is terrorism. Yeah. Yeah, it's an absolute form of abuse.
And it puts you in a bind.
Yep.
Because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't in that situation too. Yeah. It's like no matter which symptom you describe, we both lived them. She broke up easier. Someone back here, what do narcissists look for in a victim? That's a good question.
Narcissists seem to have a really great radar for really empathetic and compassionate, helpful people, and people who are potentially trained in that way from childhood, which, somebody who doesn't hold boundaries very well, so that could have been sort of instilled in childhood as well.
A people pleaser.
Yeah.
Yeah, oftentimes like agreeable individuals, as well as if you can see the narcissist, of course, through that lens of looking for supply. So when you understand what supply they're looking for, you can really understand more the dynamics of the victim they're looking for. Yeah.
I'd say also somebody who's really trusting. Yeah. High levels of emotional intelligence typically too. Yeah. Open-hearted. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the thing. We've said numerous times on our podcast that the narcissist weaponizes your virtues against you.
Yeah. Held you ransom. I was the perfect victim. That's almost always family because they know you.
Yeah, you get into family dynamics, right? Or before we can really recognize or accept the role that we've been placed in.
It's easier to groom, I would say, a child also to comply and to conform to the demands of a narcissist.
Because in a way, right, if you're raised by a narcissistic parent or you have an older sibling or something like that, they kind of create the buttons that they can then push. And so,
my husband always blames me. My husband always blames me if my kids are doing anything wrong. If you know your spouse is a narcissist but you love her, how do you accept it?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, that's a very good question.
When you live life with a narcissist and you build a life with them, it becomes a sustainability issue. So the question is, what does it cost you to sustain? It's hard to call it a relationship because it is so one-sided, and you'll find that the relationship only thrives when you're carrying it, or only survives when you're carrying it. So it is tough to be in a relationship with a narcissist, especially when you have the hope of holding the family together and holding the household together. It does cost you, and so to be able to take a look at it and see what is actually sustainable and what you can do within your capacity and what your limitations are. It's very important to consider your capacity and limitations.
And you can continue to love that person regardless of if you're in relationship or not. And just because they are on the spectrum of narcissism doesn't mean you have to stop loving them.
Mm-hmm. And I think we should make the distinction. You may have to set healthy boundaries, which is a form of kindness and love, but you may not be able to live with that person or continue doing life with that person, even though you still love them. It's unconditional love, yet in relationship there has to be deal breakers and there has to be conditional boundaries. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah.
Good questions today, everybody. Wow.
Shouldn't it be about what we can do for a narcissist, how we can fix the problem? They need support.
Another good question.
Comment.
That is a really good question. Do you want to?
Well, I think the support is different than fixing. There is nothing, you on the outside, being the outsider to somebody with narcissism, you can't fix that.
Yeah.
So you can support if they are interested in getting help and figuring that out for themselves and how they can better be in the world in a healthier way. Should they choose to do that, you can support that. What was the rest of the question there?
Well, yes. I was going to say too, from our perspective, narcissism may be a problem, may be challenging to live with, but from their perspective, they may not see it as being something that needs to be fixed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and supporting the narcissist, that's what does support actually mean and what does it look like? And the other thing is healthy relationship is never intended to complete another person. A relationship is meant to complement and enrich. And it's important to realize that we were never built to be sufficient to complete another person or to fix another person. So you will always be insufficient. It doesn't matter how much you do or how much you give until that person is ready and willing to do the work that they need to do for themselves, to own their own wounds and put the work in for their own healing. It's actually impossible to support them.
Yeah. And I think that's, there's something really pointed that you said there, Brad, is that we are insufficient to fix that. That might be a really hard truth for some people to accept, especially if you are very used to being the person that coordinates all of that for not just the narcissist in your life, but maybe other people in your life. So, yeah. We'll just let that information land with you.
Someone said, so should I work on it or should I leave? I don't know if there was more to that question beforehand.
Well, that's a loaded question in and of itself. Should I work on it or should I leave? A relationship cannot be sustained single-handedly. It's it's how much can you sustain. Again, it comes back to your own limitations and capacity.
Yeah.
You may be able to have a certain output for a certain period of time, but oftentimes a lot of people who do try to support a narcissist and uphold the relationship will actually end up with some form of psychosomatic disease or autoimmune disease, which slows them down and kind of says no for them.
Yeah, body says no. Yeah.
Chronic pain.
This was just a comment someone made a little while ago. Is because Our heart was broken because we were bombarded with the guilt and manipulation, while the narcissist seems to be stable and happy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be one of the hardest parts about it all, is that the empath does take on all that guilt and shame internally, wants to try to do things to repair it, but really the narcissist goes on and is happy because they don't have the same experience.
Yeah, and it's not reasonable for the empath to expect that the narcissist understand or be interested in the impact that it's had.
Yeah.
They're not having the same experience.
No.
Well, and yeah, that's a really good point. It's not an equal experience, because if you're providing supply, they're doing great. And even if they cut and run and discard you, oftentimes they monkey branch to another supply. So it looks like they're doing great, but really they're just parasiting onto somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They're repeating the same cycle for themselves. So ultimately, even if it looks painful up front because they look fine and happy and moving on with their lives, it ultimately is doomed. The next relationship.
Well, and a lot of times when the narcissist leaves, they'll experience a level of relief because they don't have to fake good as often.
Yeah.
And they have a little bit of that honeymoon phase, and their mood-based love is really high, and they're in that honeymoon phase. So yeah, and while you sit there absolutely devastated and completely confused.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I was trying to remember this. You've stated it before in one of our episodes, but when you leave a relationship with a narcissist, how long does it take to actually repair the damage? Because you've said it's like a month or a year for every month.
No. So that's kind of the old model.
Yeah.
So the old model was, if you're together for 10 years, it should take you 10 months. But that's not true for the narcissist.
Right.
That's kind of the way that they used to traditionally look at grief and loss, which is absolutely wrong. I will just put that out there. So the recovery, oftentimes, like we were talking about earlier, the narcissist will look for good supply because you've already been conditioned, or you already have the ability to adapt or be agreeable or that type of thing. So it's not just you healing from the time that you spent with a narcissist. Oftentimes what it does is it induces past traumas in you. So then you have to recover from all of that traumatic experience, not just your time spent with a narcissist.
Yeah.
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 I will say, just to pick up on that a little bit, that might sound really daunting to consider that past traumas might come up to be dealt with, and it's not a small thing. However, I do think there's a lot of value in that. It really could be a gift towards greater, deeper healing.
Yes.
And that will really ensure that you don't end up in a relationship like that again.
Yeah. Someone said, I came in at the right time. A relationship cannot be sustained with only one person doing the work. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you'll actually feel, like I remember in my own personal experience that that I was like, the only reason that this relationship has lasted for as long as it has was because of how much I was carrying, because of how hard I was working. And there was no way to sustain that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Someone made a comment, I've never been in a relationship with a narcissist, but have definitely had them as bosses. Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I did too. And how does that always happen? Narcissistic people become the boss? That's a great question.
Mm.
I think we've addressed this a little bit, haven't we?
Yeah, to some degree we have talked about this. But yeah, of course, they're absolutely ruthless.
Yeah.
They have no problem stepping on people, taking advantage of people, claiming certain successes that aren't theirs.
They're also charming.
Mm-hmm.
They're likable.
Yeah.
People they may appear to have leadership qualities. And I really emphasize the word appear.
Yep.
Because sometimes people will want to follow them, depending on where they are on the spectrum of
And you
narcissism.
also don't want to be the outcast that's not following them.
No.
In the work environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they can be brutal and threatening, and you don't want to be on that side of it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I found too that depending on the work environment, there's quite a lot of work environments currently that really foster a narcissistic culture.
Well, yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because there was actually discussion I think the discussion continues to some degree, where they were talking about actually taking narcissism out of the diagnostic manual, because it can be so adaptive. The strategy of narcissism can be so adaptive in certain contexts. Yeah, where, people are so kind of overconfident, and they work so hard to get the appreciation and adoration of other people that it can actually serve companies and corporations well.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Right?
Yeah.
So even though they're doing it for their own personal gain, it's like it helps the company blow up. Like, I know a lot of, especially in sales roles, there's a lot of people that will end up tremendous sales because they have no problem, taking advantage of people.
Yeah.
And they're like the top producers of sales.
Yeah.
So the organization doesn't want to get rid of them, but they're toxic to the organization or to the culture within the organization.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I also say too, like, it is a toxic environment when you're working for or under a narcissistic person. If you're in their good graces, it's lovely to be in, because they will do everything to kind of boost you, promote you. But in my experience, if you fall out of good graces with a narcissistic boss, they will do everything to continue to try to pull you apart and put you down, and
it's the
push you out.
Yeah, it's the typical idealization to devaluation to discard.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you run into the narcissist, that is going to be the cycle you run into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you get away with no support?
How do you leave the relationships? How do you get away with no support?
That's hard.
Well, yeah, it's very complicated. I mean, you'll see in the comments of the videos that we put on, a lot of people are just like, go no contact, cut it off, just get away. But we understand that there's such complexity to certain situations with a narcissist, especially if if you share a home with them, if you have children with them, if your life is really integrated with them. You're not only leaving the narcissist, you have to structure everything, restructure your whole life entirely. Now, if it's a situation where there's a violent narcissist, you unfortunately have to go to kind of an extreme level where you have to get authorities involved, like police protection, or you may have to go to a protective shelter. Just to get clear space. Most jurisdictions, of course we don't know where you are, but most jurisdictions do provide, community support for that type of thing. So it's worth kind of starting to do the investigation and exploration into what might actually be available to you.
Mm-hmm. And we provide support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you can find professionals in your area or online to provide support and ideas and assistance in that area. That's another thing too. And community. So there is you're saying sort of no support, but if you can find a community of people who can at least offer a safe space and emotional support to you, and that can help to boost you up as well. We do have a community huddle that we do. We'll be doing our first one on May 4th, so that can be registered as well on our website.
We haven't done I guess you'd say like a real community huddle since the beginning of the pandemic.
Yeah, we used to do them live or like in person.
That was how we started all of this. Is we recognized personally we had a lot of interactions with narcissism and how challenging it was, and we had started connecting with other people who were going through it. So we thought, okay, let's bring Brad in and host some in-person support groups, essentially information and support groups on narcissism. And we had lots of people coming, people wanting more, and then COVID hit. So that's why we started the podcast, was to fill in some of the gaps. But we are offering now a virtual community huddle on the first Wednesdays of every May. Every May, every month.
Starting
with the idea that community is about common unity, and that community is ultimately having support from other people who have gone through similar experiences with narcissism is what is going to help move you forward in a way that you can't get on your own.
And it really is amazing to be involved in a group where the other people understand what your experience is, right? They can identify and they can say, these are the resources that I found, or these are the resources that I used. So I mean, like we're mentioning, we're here to create a community of support as well.
And even simply the connection to other people who understand and who may be healthier in that sense really does help.
And I found too, in my own personal experiences and seeing other people go through it, when you can share your story and hear that other people have gone through similar things, because narcissists do have a lot of similar tactics. And when you can hear and be like, oh, that's so similar to my story, I'm not crazy, and can validate that you aren't crazy for having gone through that experience, that really helps the healing too.
And it really is, healing is a process, and those that are further along in the healing process can be a great resource in and of themselves. And it's even encouraging to hear how people have healed, in order for you to even conceptualize what that might even look like.
This person said, even after getting safe, the fear continues, the doubt continues.
And that's a result, that's the complex PTSD, as well as residual trauma bond as well.
And this person said, I'm still scared of having to see him in court.
Yes.
Reasonable.
It's a visceral experience. Like your body just has the reaction it has.
Also, too, having time and space away from those relationships shifts your connection to that person. And when you're having to re-engage with them, you're re-engaging a lot of that trauma.
That's a really great point, Jackie, because it's almost as if, like, you may feel as if you've stepped out of certain behaviors and patterns, and then having to re-engage with them, even if it's not even directly, because within a court experience there's some buffering between you and the other person. It still will reignite that same sensation that you were in when you were in the more intimate space of a relationship. So just, that's normal, uncomfortable, but to be expected, really. I literally feel sick when I think of it.
Well, and this is a strong word to use, or a strong comparison to use, but it's very similar. The violation goes so deep on so many levels. It's like expecting a rape victim to see their rapist in court. It's just, it feels cruel.
This one person asked a question, can you explain why you're so tired after the abuse?
Yeah. Well, partly is you're in typically when you're in the relationship, you may have experienced being in a very heightened state of alertness, this hypervigilance, being hyper responsible, not really knowing what you may or may not run into, what may trigger or not trigger. So there's a lot of tension and anxiety and stress, and stepping out of that allows you time to rest. You may even notice, people will say that, and there's this expectation that you just go to rest. But that's not necessarily the case, because once you're out, you may still find that there might be periods of rest and then periods of heightened anxiety again, because your body and your nervous system are wired to have that experience. So some patience with yourself and some kindness and gentleness with yourself, that you're safe when you're, if you are still away, that you're safe, and reminding yourself and your body that you're safe, and having things that you can do, particularly moving your body, can really help to sort of re-regulate to this safer experience, so that nervous system can rewire.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things that you can do, but that's partly why you're so tired. It's an exhausting experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I like the language that you use, because it really is a whole neurological rewiring. It is your nervous system is undergoing a reboot to some degree, and then of course how integrated your life was with a narcissist, everything that was integrated now changes instantly. So it's not just the one stressor. You have a complexity of stressors, one on top of the other. So it's absolutely exhausting. The only way through is really one step at a time, one moment at a time.
Yeah.
To even think a week ahead can feel overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah.
Exhaustion is the biggest thing. I felt so much, so I couldn't do anything for months. Yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
And someone else said I'm still on fight or flight mode after 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's very typical. And a lot of people around you who have been through breakups before, that have never been in a relationship with a narcissist, will not understand that they'll look at you as though there's something completely wrong with you, not realizing the complexity of the residual trauma bond that sits there. So that's why it's so important to approach it very intentionally and own the wounding and own the wound, so that you can own your healing and work through a structured healing process.
Yeah.
It takes the time it takes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you do things to move yourself forward, but don't have an expectation of a time frame to be around that.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. The fear of bumping into him keeps me from going out and doing things.
Yeah.
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 I have a hard time getting out of bed. My mind and body doesn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This is what I like to call the shut in, shut down, shut up, and shut out. Right? It's basically that cocooning type thing where you really just want to hide under your covers, and you just want to lay there, or you just have nothing in you, like the energy is completely depleted. And so that's why we kind of shut out the world. Mm-hmm. We shut in because it feels more safe, and we can manage our vulnerabilities better that way. We shut up because you don't know what to trust at that point. Shut down where it's just like, all you want to do is sit there and watch Netflix or something like that, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
So is there anything else but feel guilty? The depression had gotten so bad. I was admitted to the psych unit.
Mm-hmm.
My friends and family want us to be supportive, but think being safe means it's over and I should be happy.
No, it's only the beginning. When it's over, it's only the beginning of your healing and like we were talking about, the restructuring of your entire neurological system.
And two, like, yeah, the restructuring, and the other part I was going to say is when you finally start realizing, again, as Brad says, you don't know what you're dealing with till you know what you're dealing with. When you realize you've been in relationship with a narcissist, you also have to go through and reframe
Yes.
every experience you've had with that person to fully integrate and understand what happened with them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I know in my experiences, I'd just be walking around, and when I realized that it was due to narcissism, I'd be like, oh, okay, so when I had this one particular interaction 5 years ago or 6 years ago, and this happened, this is why. And you have to like go through it and sort everything out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it can feel shocking,
Yeah.
right? Once you're on the other side, to be reframing those types of experiences, it can feel really shocking. So we just encourage you to stay out of any self-judgment around that.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's not going to help move you forward. And there's nothing to judge.
Yeah.
You know, you were doing the best you knew how to do at the time.
Yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people, like you're talking about, try not to self-judge. Try to work towards grace for yourself and understanding for yourself. Because what you need in this situation is validation of your experience. And a lot of people will ask, like, what's wrong with me? Especially if you've never had the experience before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
And there isn't anything wrong with you.
Nothing wrong with you.
Usually.
You had an experience and you survived it.
Yeah.
And you had the opportunity to rewire.
So I think our time is coming to a close here. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for joining us today. This was a really great conversation.
Yeah.
Lots of awesome questions. Our plan is to try to go live most Wednesdays around this time, 7:15 to 8, with a Q&A or a topic. If people have something in particular, we will address. The first Wednesday of every month is from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Mountain Time is when we're going to be hosting our more private community virtual huddle. That has 19 spaces available for this upcoming Wednesday, and that's designed to be a more intimate experience. It'll be on a Google Meet or Zoom, so you can interact with us face to face, ask questions.
Yeah, kind of connect with each other. And the purpose of it really is to provide that supportive community so you don't feel alone in it, and so that we can kind of explore through some meaningful ways to help you get through.
Yeah.
And
A
you
little
can
more targeted experience.
Yeah, and registration for that is required. There's a link on our website under book sessions and click Community Huddle. Right now it shows there's no events. You have to click over to the May calendar to see the registration for the May event. And we do offer one-to-one sessions as well, and you can book 30-minute free sessions or the 1 hour one-to-one sessions through our website too.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Yes.
Great questions tonight. Awesome.
Yes, phenomenal.
Oh, someone said, how do you sign up? And yes, we are based in Canada. So on our if you go back to our main page on TikTok, I have a link tree set up there. There's a few different links. You can book the sessions. Like I said, you can book the Community Huddle, and then it'll take you to our website. Again, it shows there's nothing in April, so click over to the May calendar, and it will be available for May. And you can also send us an email if you're having any problems, and we can walk you through it. If you're in Canada, you can register slightly differently too. We just can't do e-transfers outside of Canada. Okay, and yeah, if you have more questions, comments, please send us a DM or an email. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.
Am I out yet? Nope.